I'm going to talk about iced again. One more time. Okay, just one more time. I'm going to talk about iced. Ugh. And then that's it. I promise, for at least a week and a half. What's good, everybody? Welcome, you bunch of stinky nerds, to the movie mecca, pop culture mass. I am His Holiness, the Bishop of Bull Moose. You already know. And recently, my esteemed YouTube colleagues and brothers from another's mothers, Last Movie Standing and AVA Pop Culture, recently recorded a, a feature-length live commentary with myself for Vinegar Syndrome's recent release of the cult classic slasher Iced. That commentary is a 3-hour video, so if you've watched it, thanks. But for those of you who have not yet watched our commentary, maybe that's because you haven't seen Iced yet, you're still on the fence. I wanted to put out a shorter video that would help people decide if Iced is for them. So here's a much shorter review. And if you've seen Iced and you like Iced, then please go watch our commentary. Now, Vinegar Syndrome does what they do. They recently rescued Iced from relative obscurity. It was released direct to VHS in, I think it was like 88 or 89, might have been 89, after having been made in 87. So this is a product of 1987. It got released a year or two later, and it never received a theatrical release. It never received a Laserdisc or a DVD release. It really was like this product of the mid 80s boom in demand for video content that rental stores could stock their shelves with. But it never really had a life too much beyond that. In more recent decades, it has been very neglected. So God bless Vinegar Syndrome for doing what they do and rescuing a film from obscurity. In a way, you think about that video store explosion of like quick and cheap content, which Iced definitely is. That content was like of a much lower quality than a bigger budget theatrical stuff of the time. Again, Iced fits that bill. It's not a really like dissimilar analogy to the mid 20 teens explosion in content produced for streaming services. There was a similar explosion in streaming about a decade or so ago. OG streaming services like Netflix and Hulu felt a lot of pressure to constantly bring fresh new movies and TV stuff to their customers. Some of the content produced for streaming services has been fairly well regarded. Stuff like Stranger Things or maybe the first 2 seasons of House of Cards from Netflix are pretty well thought of. But so much of the streaming exclusive content in more recent years has been regarded as like cheap, uninspired monkey shit whose sole purpose is more algorithmic than artistic. So in that way, something like Iced must seem like a giant, sticky puddle of donkey cum to someone of my parents' generation. My mom or my dad would look at Iced in 1989 when I was like, hey, let's rent this. They'd have been like, what the fuck is this piece of shit? That's the way they looked at it. Just like I look at Netflix swill like Damsel as if it's a convicted sex offender that just moved in next door to me. I got 2 younger daughters, so that would be a problem. Circa 1989, 1990, 1991, I was just the right age to eat up pieces of shit like Iced.
You eat pieces of shit.
There will undoubtedly be videos decades from now on YouTube, like sucking Damsel's dick. I'm sure there's people that are like 8 years old that watched Damsel last year and they're going to have some nostalgic boner for it. The way that I look at Iced, I can't deny my bias. It's the circle of life, albeit a more vulgar and coarse iteration than The Lion King. Everything I've just said in my
Rambling, incoherent
preamble is to illustrate that while I am going to recommend Iced to you, I accept that it's not for everyone. Like natto or going ass to mouth, Iced will only appeal to that particularly feral appetite of a true schlock connoisseur, but I'm hoping that's you. So I'll start my sales pitch with a few cons. Let's just get those out of the way. Iced, the Blu-ray, released by Vinegar Syndrome, suffers from exceedingly poor video quality, much poorer video quality than you would expect from a Blu-ray. This is bad. It comes from a tape master. Unfortunately, the 16 millimeter elements that this was shot in, they don't exist anymore. Nobody can find them. People don't know where they are. They might have been thrown away or destroyed. The moral of the story is the elements were transferred to tape and quite possibly even edited on tape. So there might not be a like fully functional edited version of this film on film. It might just exist on tape anyway. So it's a tape master and it looks like a tape master. It very much looks like a tape master. It almost looks like they like dialed it up to 11. They're like really going for the VHS experience. The aspect ratio also consistent with that VHS experience. It's a 1.33 to 1 aspect ratio. The standard CRT 4:3. If you grew up with one, you know what I'm talking about. If you're in your early 20s, you might not. It is what it is, but that aspect ratio and the poor video quality, there's usually work put into the restoration when there's access to the original film elements. I mean, in this case, Vinegar Syndrome's hands may have been tied. It might have been one of those situations where you get what you get and you don't get upset, as my 5-year-old says. We have a tape master or nothing. You can either take this VHS looking piece of shit or you get nothing. That's really my one complaint. The biggest drawback for me is that I would have liked to see this in a little bit higher quality, picture quality. A little bit higher picture quality would have been nice, but it becomes part of the experience as well. And I'll circle back to that in a moment. I will also say as a con that Iced, because it was made in the later 80s, it's kind of coming in on the tail end of that late 70s, early 80s slasher boom, where that was a very popular genre. But as time went on, things had been done. By 87, when this was produced, we already had Halloween 1, 2, 3 had already been produced. Several Friday the 13th, uh, probably most the first 5, I think at least Friday the 13th had been produced prior to 1987. Freddy Krueger was a thing. So as we're getting to the end of the 80s, ICED is probably not pushing any new boundaries. However, this might also become a benefit as well, because I think ICED works in a kind of self-referential, almost meta approach to the slasher in that way. Not quite the level of something like Scream, which would come out about a decade later and really push that whole like self-aware, kind of meta aware of the slasher genre. I think this might be a little bit self-aware though. It's like a step before Scream, but they don't quite play it totally serious. It's hard to take Iced very seriously for reasons that I will enumerate shortly. Now on to the pros. This is a much longer list. I think Iced has a lot more to offer in the pro category than however many cons you might be able to come up with. The first and foremost pro to me is that this movie is very fucking 80s. This is a big selling point for me. I mean, obviously it was made in the 80s, but like they really kind of played it up. The hair, the clothing. I mean, Lisa Loring's hair. I mean, she must have spent an hour just trying to get that thing fucking puffed out to here. The ski clothing, especially that opening sequence that's set 4 years earlier at the ski lodge. If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. But the film opens with a lengthy scene that sort of sets everything up. And it's 4 years earlier, and all the characters are 4 years younger, and they're all in college, and they're all like they're decked out in a way that you would expect people to be decked out around 1983, 1984. It's everything you want it to be. If you like that 80s vibe, that 80s drip, they got it, and they got that attitude. So I really appreciated that. That's something I really like. If I'm taking a nostalgic trip down memory lane, I want to feel it. I want to get all of that nostalgic vibe. And this movie delivers in that sense. Now, Iced also presents us with some very nice, very tasteless nudity and sexual content. They throw in a lot of unnecessary nudity. They linger on the nudity. You get a lot of close-ups that border on uncomfortable, and it's good. It's good. You're gonna like it. You're gonna appreciate it. There's even a little bit of dude booty in there if that's your thing, you know, if you like dude booty. If you're a heterosexual chick or a homosexual dude and you like dude booty, hey, there's some of that in here too. So Iced is designed to please. It's meant to please. It's here to entertain you. So there's some excellent nudity. Lisa Loring, I mentioned earlier with the big hair, she gets butt naked in several scenes and she's all about that life, and you got to appreciate that. You have to appreciate the young ladies frolicking nude in an R-rated slasher film. I've probably said that enough times, but you know, it's a nice little bonus. Another big selling point for this film is the character relationships and melodrama. This film features a group of friends who are reconnecting at a cabin in the snowy mountains for a ski trip after having been college buddies, maybe roommates 4 years earlier. So there's kind of this unspoken dynamic. And I think anybody who's a little bit older, if you're able to be nostalgic about the 80s, you're certainly of the right age to have been through college. You meet people, people in your classes. You're taking a freshman English class. You're going to meet people from all over campus, all over the state, maybe all over the country. Who's your roommate in the dorm? Some random stranger, and you might become really close friends. The idea at the beginning of the film, in the flashback, it shows this group of friends. They're all gathered together at this ski lodge for this opening sequence of events that's really going to kind of set the stage for the rest of the film. You get the idea that they're young, they're 22, they're 23, they're college kids, they're partying, they're living it up. But when they're gathering together again 4 years later for the majority of the film, you get the sense that they've all kind of grown a little bit. They're all trying to live more mature and adult lives. And you even get the sense that maybe these people wouldn't even really be friends if they met now. But they're still friends and they're still trying to hold together this like social unit that they have, almost out of a habitual sense, or maybe, they just don't want to break up with each other. They don't want to like sever these friendships that they have. They kind of still have this meaning, this almost nostalgic meaning to the characters, but it's actually kind of well done. Like I hesitate to praise them too much for like the writing or the construction of this film, but they present this kind of eclectic group of people that at first blush you're like, what are all these people doing in a cabin in the woods together? It doesn't really make sense. You got a doctor guy, you got another guy who like might be a drug dealer or maybe a severe drug addict, but he's got lots of drugs and a gun, so and a really shitty 80s ponytail. Like it's a weird mixture of humans. Like one couple is married, and you get the sense that they're kind of trying to build this sort of like mid to late 80s yuppie family that they're probably going to spit out a couple of kids in the late 80s or early 90s and sort of settle down into this mediocre suburban life. Meanwhile, staying upstairs is their friend from a few years ago that they met in college, who's a fucking cocaine dealer with a gun. It's a weird mixture of people that at first blush doesn't feel like they belong together. But because we saw them 4 years earlier in their more kind of ruckus younger years, and because I've kind of gone through something similar where you have all these close friendships from your late teens and early 20s, people that you met in college, that really like this person still means a lot to you, even if you've kind of grown apart. And efforts to maintain these relationships over the distance of geography and time is still something that takes a little bit of effort, and maybe it's not as easy because you got a job, you got kids, you got a house to maintain, you got an internship, you got a shitty YouTube channel, and it's it's hard. You can't see these people every weekend, you can't talk to them on the phone every week, but once a year, twice a year, once every other year, you still try to get together. And I got the sense that this was that group, and it actually really just felt true to life, even if these characters were like wild and not fully fleshed out, but just all of the fun parts. Like I said, the guy with the gun and the cocaine who walks around naked, walks around the cabin naked, just doing fucking blow off the largest mirror, you can 5 foot mirror with a gun in his hand. It's out of fucking control in a good way. I will also say this is a very melodramatic film. It's like a soap opera. There's some good kills. I appreciate them. They're not Nothing really new. Some of the stuff we've seen before, like the thing coming through the neck. Even the Kama Sutra runs out of positions at some point. You know, you can only come up with 400 or 600 or 900 positions, and once you've done them all, you got to go back to number one and redo a few of them. That's this film. It redoes a few kills that you've probably seen before, but still fun. Like, you like that pie, bitch? Boom, got you, you know? Homeboy, one of the first kills of the movie, Homeboy gets reduced to a greasy smear on an icy road because apparently he can't just roll to the side. It's ridiculous. One bitch gets a fucking 80s boombox thrown into the hot tub and zzz, you know, there's fun stuff even if it's not super creative or original. There's a cozy setting here too that I really like. I really enjoy the coziness of Iced. There's something, to me at least, that works so well about an isolated ski retreat as a lure to murder these like self-absorbed yuppies, like the fuckers in this movie. They're all these yuppie characters. I mean, they're like mid to late 20s, circa 1987. It's like exactly that demographic. And I gotta say, it makes the kills a little bit more fun watching these fuckers get iced. But like, there's a coziness to the setting. There's not a lot of variety. I mean, most of the film takes place in and around the cabin in the snowy woods. There's a little bit of, you know, there's a little skiing outdoors. There's a little bit of the ski lodge 4 years earlier, but you know, there's a warmth to it. There's like the fireplace, the glow that casts, the warmth of that, the ambience of that, the time that these characters spend making home cooked meals. Like, there's a giant portion of this film where we just like cut to people in the kitchen chatting, and like there's exposition and they're just making some home cooked meals. But I don't know, there's something like just really kind of cozy about that. Even the style and color of the kitchen with its like wood grain cabinets and its yellow laminate countertop and old appliances, it gives it this like dated feel. It, for me, harkens back to like the earliest days that I can remember of my life, just being 3 and 4 years old, but being in that era and looking around and like that's what shit looked like back then. And maybe that's why it's cozy to me, is what I'm saying. But I just really feel like this like cozy, nostalgic setting in a film like Iced makes just like a really great contrast for the horror slash slasher elements. Nice contrast, nice balance, in my opinion. Makes it more fun to just kind of throw on. There's also a really kind of dreamlike ambiance here that I think is probably a little bit more like, this film is a little bit more abstract and dreamlike in its narrative than other slashers that may have come before it, where there is some subjectivity to the narrative of films like A Nightmare on Elm Street, but even Nightmare on Elm Street, because the characters are dreaming, but even Nightmare on Elm Street makes it pretty clear the line between the waking time and the dream time, what's happening when they're awake and what's happening when they're asleep. Sometimes you don't know that they're dreaming until something weird starts occurring, but the mechanic of something like A Nightmare on Elm Street makes it clear that there is the dream space and there's the waking world, and it kind of clarifies the diegetic world that the characters inhabit in something like A Nightmare on Elm Street. But in Iced, there is not a lot of clarity as to like what's a flashback to years earlier and what's a fantasy that the characters are having, what's a dream sequence, and the whole film really feels like a fever dream at times. So there's a really just a great deal of subjectivity to the narrative. I don't want to give too much away by citing specific examples for those of you who want to check it out, but I mean, there are scenes where something really wild will happen, and then it'll cut to one of the characters like fully clothed again, holding a, you know, a glass of whiskey up to his forehead, and it's like, did that whole last scene just happen? Because this is kind of a really weird place to pick up with this character if that just happened. But also, we're seeing him, maybe he's waking up right now, but they're not really super clear about it. And so you know, the blending, you know, going from a fantasy sequence to a dream sequence to whatever is the waking reality is a lot less clear. I mean, I think it works. It makes the whole movie feel like a fever dream. I mean, you could tell me that the whole rest of the movie was a fever dream after that intro sequence set 4 years earlier, and I'd believe it, because There's like smoke. They had like a fog machine, even inside the cabin. How does fucking smoke get inside the cabin? I don't know. Maybe somebody closed the flue, but like there's sequences where the killer is attacking, and the presence of the fog machine and the dry ice indoors, like on the steps, on the staircase, doesn't exactly enhance the feeling of like a very strict narrative continuity. So in my mind, that's a pro because it sets something up that's bordering on the fantastical, in my opinion, and it makes for a little bit more interest in the sequence of events that you're going to watch unfold. Even several of the cons that I mentioned aren't totally cons, depending on who you ask. I mean, the aspect ratio and poor video quality that I complain about are nonetheless accurate reflections of what watching this on home video in 1989 would have been like. So that's a small consolation in my mind. I would have preferred to see this in a Blu-ray quality, but I also believe that it is an experience that's set in a certain time. I mean, it's inextricable from its period of production. So it's a small consolation to think that seeing it on VHS quality in a 4:3 aspect ratio is appropriate, at least for how people would have viewed Iced back in the day, as they say, just like we did back in '89. And so, at the end of the day, Iced is like a daytime soap opera crossed with Friday the 13th Part Two, but it's set in the snow and it's made by people who, much like us, have a reverence for the slasher films of the 1980s. So I think I can recommend it on that basis alone. And ultimately, if you know what you're going into with Iced and you're on board for that, you know what they're selling you and you're buying it, then I think you're going to have a great time. Invite some of your friends over, grab some cold beers, definitely eat an edible while you're drinking the beers, order a pizza, and enjoy all of that stuff while you watch Dice. This film is worth every penny. If you got a good group of folks to watch it with you, you got some pizza, you got some weed, you got some beer, you're going to have a great time. Very enjoyable film, and I have to recommend it. Now, if you're still here, I'd like to thank you so much for watching this video. As well, I'd like to apologize to the Japanese people. I'd like to say that I don't know why your important cultural food of natto reminded me immediately of removing a penis from someone's butt and then immediately placing it into their mouth. But I think everyone would see through that particular fabrication. The truth is, everyone who is not Japanese knows exactly why natto lives right next door to shit dick. I'd rather chug a gallon of Vegemite out of a leather flask made from unwashed foreskins than ever eat natto again. But Ninja Scroll fucks though. And so do you for watching this video, dog. Peace. I'm out.